With deepest sympathy are the words appearing on many a condolence card. Well-meaning, to be sure, but are those words really enough? What is the best way to console after the loss of a loved one? Our cover story is reported by Susan Spencer.
You look like somebody who's in love.
Oh, we were so happy to.
Leslie Gray Streeter says the wedding pictures tell the tale
You're glowing.
Oh, thank you. I know.
of her picture-perfect marriage to husband Scott.
What was Scott like?
He was hilarious and funny. I met him when I was 14. We were in high school together in Baltimore. And
They went their separate ways, but as if by fate, 20 years later, both moved to West Palm Beach, Florida. They reconnected, and then they really reconnected.
he emailed me and said, "Can I take you out for a drink?" And then I walked in and he smiled at me and I went, "Oh." His eyes were so like, and I was like, "Oh, that's that guy. That's that guy."
You know, we throw around the words love of your life.
Yeah.
Does that fit?
It does.
They married, but tragically, only 5 years later, at age 44, Scott died of a heart attack. Leslie's grief was all-consuming.
We had so many plans, just so many things he did not get to do, and it wasn't fair. It's not fair.
I think I read that 2.5 million Americans die each year.
Yes.
If you figure each one of them has 2 or 3 people who may grieve their loss, that's a lot of people going around suffering from symptoms of grief, right?
That's exactly right.
Psychiatry professor Dr. Catherine Shear at the Columbia University School of Social Work studies grief, that shattering emotion that eventually touches us all.
How long should people expect to grieve?
I have an easy answer to that: for a lifetime.
While most of us eventually adapt to a new normal, 1 in 10 endures what Dr. Shear calls complicated grief. For them, the acute phase of grief never lets up.
It's more common after someone young dies. It's more common after a violent death of some sort.
And she says she sees it among military families who have lost service members in combat.
If it's not dealt with, what happens to people?
It really kind of ruins a person's life. I mean, it makes it very difficult to engage in anything meaningful and connect with other people. But we also listen to
Dr.
nonverbal
Shear works with
communication.
therapists on creative ways to help people overcome complicated grief, and as to why grief itself is for all of us so hard to face.
We all have death anxiety. That's very natural.
We don't want to be reminded.
We don't
this
want to
is
be
where
reminded.
We're all ending up.
Exactly.
Which may explain why, according to a new CBS News poll, half of all Americans admit to not knowing what to say to someone who is grieving.
The reason that a lot of people weren't asking me to really share how I was feeling with them was because they didn't want to know the answer. They were uncomfortable around the topic of loss.
Rebecca Sofer was a rising young producer for Stephen Colbert in 2006 when her mother was killed in a car crash. At 30, she says, she felt like an orphaned child.
I just kind of went into this, almost like this mental silence, because everything was so overwhelming to me.
You were close to her?
She was my best friend. She was everybody's cheerleader. She was the best of human beings.
Along with shock and grief, she found herself adrift in a culture of platitudes.
I often felt that the onus was on me to make everybody around me feel a lot more comfortable talking about my dead mom than the onus being on them to make me feel comfortable sharing my feelings.
Then there were the well-meaning gifts.
Did people give you stuff? I mean, what did they?
Yes, edible arrangements.
Edible arrangements?
I got 14 of them.
14 edible
I
arrangements?
got 14 of them the week after my mom's death.
Did you get any cards that actually helped?
I did. I got 2 cards that
Two.
really helped, but really helped, and I have them to this day.
According to that same CBS News poll, 4 out of 10 Americans think sending a sympathy card is the best thing to do.
I read somewhere that Americans send 100 million sympathy cards a year, which seems absolutely astonishing.
It is.
Do you feel like people who buy your cards are, in essence, depending on you to kind of avoid the agony in figuring out what it is they're supposed to say?
Yeah, and they should. You know, that's my job.
Greg Vovos writes sympathy cards for American Greetings outside Cleveland, Ohio.
What would you absolutely avoid? Are there things that you see in sympathy cards that make you cringe?
I would avoid saying, you're going to get over this, time will heal these wounds, I've been there.
Yours are mixed in among these. Show me some of the ones that you've done.
Okay, here's one.
Healing thoughts.
The challenge, he says, is to be true, but not trite.
You're writing a card for a moment that is the most personal time in someone's life. There are no words, but there are heartfelt wishes.
Writing about grief is something Rebecca Sofer also understands. 4 years after her mother died, her father died too. In 2013, she and a close friend co-founded Modern Loss.
So here's our homepage. And as you can see, it's very simple.
She sees it not just as a website, but as a movement built on shared personal stories of grief from around the world, sometimes with an unexpected twist.
So this is a piece that makes me laugh time and again.
What mom would have thought of the Kardashian clan?
Yep.
Says the real reason I miss her is because she's not here to discuss reality TV with me.
Yeah.
With titles like My Grief is Bleeping Funny and The Surviving Spouse's Guide to Surviving a Hallmark Holiday, it's not exactly Grandma's take on grieving.
It sounds like you're just basically trying to blow up all stigma that's attached to grief.
Yeah, we are. People think it's contagious, like they're going to catch grief, but it's like, you know, you're not.
It's that stigma,
It
though.
is. You're not going to catch grief. It's not a thing.
Which brings us back to Leslie Gray Streeter, a writer herself for the Palm Beach Post. She discovered Modern Loss while trying to cope with Scott's death.
You read it and you go, someone else feels like me. Someone else has to get up in the morning and put on earrings and like find their keys and figure out what to eat for breakfast and still have this elephant stepping on their chest, this grief and this pain.
As if to show that there are no rules for that, Streeter submitted her own essay to Modern Loss, What I Did with My Husband's Life Insurance Money.
Let me see it. That is gorgeous.
Thank you.
What she did was buy a sparkling new stone for her engagement ring. She'd lost the original while Scott was still alive.
It made me feel like he was still here.
Well, he'll always be a part of you, right?
Always. Always. He was so cool.
Grief is the thing that levels us all. Grief is the thing that pulls all of us together. You want more? Okay, hold on.
Rebecca Sofer's mission today, to spread that word. Dealing with death is simply part of living life.
Oh my.